Okay. This webinar is being recorded. By participating in this webinar, you agree that Angelique Robbins owns all rights to this recording, and you grant her permission to use your image and any handwritten or spoken comments you choose to offer during the course of this webinar in any manner she chooses.
Total control over your life.
Here.
You can't hear?
Come here.
Can everybody else hear? If you can hear, will you give me a thumbs up? Okay, good. And it must be on your end, Susan. And I'm going to mute you. Okay, so for those who have never been to one of these webinars before, my name is Angel, and when I was 19 years old, I had a near-death experience. In that near-death experience, I met a tsunami of energy. I referred to that energy as God. It replied back to me that its name was Geschichte. I learned later that it was the angelic realm, and that night that I was dying, it saved my life. Over the course of the next 13 years, I was led to study with a particular woman and led to study with the angelic realm, and learned a lot about emotional alchemy, which is what we will be discussing today. So I actually know a lot about this topic too, but what's going to happen is that I'm going to sing a song that Geschichte taught me when I was in my 20s, and after I'm done singing that song, I will then be channeling Geschichte. So the angelic realm will speak through me to you guys about this topic of transforming emotions. And at some point, they'll open the floor up for questions, and that's about it. So I'm going to sing. Just relax and close your eyes while I mute everyone. Om Sei Safanata. Om Sei Safanata. Ooh, ooh, hey, Seiken come, Seiken, Seiken come, Seiken. Ooh, safe no. Ooh, for say, safe come, Seiken. Hey, for no day. Hey, for no day. Come for day. He come for day. Ha, hey, e, for note. Ha, hey, e, for note. Home, fall, moon, sun, tian, canoe. Home, fall, moon, sun, tian, canoe. Nyam 48. Nyam 48. Home for noon, sun, tian, canoe. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world. It's wonderful to see all of you. Wonderful to see that so many are interested in this topic. Can you all hear us? Can you give us a thumbs up if you can hear us? Good. A very important topic, how to transform emotion. Because in general, the majority of your life is experienced as an emotional journey. You are constantly gauging where you are in life or how much you enjoy life based on the emotions that you're experiencing. Now, when we begin teaching this, a lot of time we get responses from people that are about how emotions shouldn't be paid attention to, and how if you allow your emotions to be so important to you, it often means to people that you're going to allow those emotions to control you, control your behavior, control your thoughts, control your interactions, all of that stuff. The interesting thing is that quite the opposite is true. If you do not pay attention to your emotions, if you do not get to know them intimately, the emotions will control you. So even if you have convinced yourself that you have an ability to control your emotions because you're not perhaps spilling your stuff onto everyone all of the time, if you're not tending to those emotions, if it's only a behavior modification, then in fact your emotions are still controlling you, and they're also controlling your point of magnetism. Okay, you live in a magnetic based reality. So for any part of you that is in a place of unawareness or in a place of denial, you are going to be magnetizing to yourself based on those areas of denial or those areas of unawareness. And then you'll see it play out in your life and ask, why is this kind of thing happening to me? Why is this kind of thing happening to me? We have clients who will say, well, I'm generally a happy person. I don't understand why this type of thing happens to me. And while there are many answers to that, one of the first things that we will tackle with someone is finding out what emotions are beneath the surface, okay? You guys are kind of like glaciers. what you see at the top, what you seem to think of as yourself, is only a very small percentage of what you actually are. And even that which you perceive as yourself is a small percentage of what you're even aware of, okay? So literally, you can understand yourself to be something. You can be something in your own perception, in your own awareness, and perhaps talk to 5 other people that know you, and they might have a different take on who you are. They might have a different take on what you emit on a regular basis, okay? And that's simply because other people are experiencing other components of you that perhaps you're in denial of, okay? So one of the best ways to the best way to really get a handle on your point of magnetism and to be able to get a handle on your ability to have a broad sense of self-awareness is to get in touch with the emotions that you're feeling. All right. Now, obviously, when we begin to speak about this, the main thing that we're talking about is negative emotions, because ultimately you guys don't have a problem with your positive emotions. You recognize that you want the positive emotions. So in essence, the negative emotions, the other way to say that is the emotions that you don't want, right? How do you take emotions that you don't want and transform them into something that you do want? Number 1, you have to be willing to admit that they exist, all right? This is the very first and most important step, is being able to admit that the negative emotions that you're experiencing actually exist, all right? So one thing that we see in the New Age movement, which we 100% disagree with, is the focus on positivity, as though if you focus negatively, it's going to ruin all of your positive focus. And nothing could be further from the truth. In fact, when you only focus positively and simultaneously ignore whatever negative focus you have, you are, in fact, giving power and giving energy without understanding that you are to the negative focus, okay? Because essentially what you're doing is creating a state of denial regarding the broad spectrum of emotion that you're feeling on a daily basis, all right? So while we agree with the mindset, meaning the mindset of, it's important for me to have positive focus. Yeah, we agree with that. It is important to have positive focus, meaning it is important to be able to focus in the direction of what you want. All right. It's extremely important. It's also extremely powerful in regard to creating momentum toward what you want. And it's extremely powerful in being able to transform negative emotions to begin with a type of mindset. But where it goes wrong is by ignoring the vast array of negative emotions that you experience. Because what is happening is you're basically saying to those components of yourself that are experiencing those negative emotions, you're saying to those components, you don't really matter. All right? Or you don't matter enough for me to pay attention to you. So it would be like, what if you had 10 children and 5 of them were really well behaved. 5 of them seemed happy most of the time. They were generally easy to be around and whatnot. They obeyed you. And then your other 5 were just rambunctious nuts and cry, throw fits. And basically you said to your 10 kids, all right, you 5, because I like the way you act, you get to come with me. You 5, because I don't like the way you act, I'm going to lock you in a closet. Tell us what's going to happen. Are those 5 kids that you lock in the closet, are they going to get healthier? Or are they going to get unhealthier? Obviously, they're going to get unhealthier. The funny thing is that the internal world of you is exactly the same as this scenario. So anytime you're picking out the negative emotions that you don't want, it's basically the equivalent of picking out the negative children that exist within you and telling them, you don't have a place in this world with me. And so then what happens? Then your energy is split into different sections of yourself. So when you try to focus on what you want, you're missing half of your energy. Okay? Do you know how difficult it is to work towards something you want when you're missing half of your energy? It's very difficult. It takes a lot longer. So this process of emotional alchemy is to simultaneously be able to give the message to yourself that compassion toward yourself is of the highest priority, okay? Which also teaches you that compassion toward others is of the highest priority, which is, in fact, the way this world can heal, is for people to take this mindset to heart and apply it. But it also allows you to start cultivating a whole self, a whole adult self that is in a state of full awareness, that is in a state of continual integration, so that all of the energy of you can be moving toward whatever it is you want, okay? Now, the reason the mindset is so important is because you guys grow up learning how to be manipulative. All human beings are manipulative to some degree until they really pay attention to those areas of manipulation, all right? But since most people are also in denial of this manipulative tendency, they don't realize that the way they go about getting things they want is still through a method of manipulation, okay? You want to be careful to not do that with yourself. So when we tell you that emotional alchemy is one of the ways to be able to get what you want, what you need to keep an eye on is your mindset in the realm of, well, because there's something I want, I'm going to do this emotional alchemy in order to get what I want? Or is your mindset, I'm going to interact in emotional alchemy to bring a feeling of acceptance, compassion, and love toward myself? Okay. Obviously, the second one we just spoke of is the proper mindset. The second one is the way that you won't create more problems for yourself with these processes. You've got to be able to come to a place within yourself where your mindset is truly about taking care of you, is truly about having love toward yourself, is truly about having compassion toward yourself. And that's the end goal, basically, all right? Then the rewards of this process can come to you easier. So you see, it's kind of tricky, all right? So first thing being established, awareness and mindset. Second is the ability to really assess what emotion you want to go into first, because overall you guys have a lot of suppressed negative emotions, which are signaling and creating your point of magnetism. So it's not like you're just going to pick one and it's going to be done forevermore. You're going to pick one, and that one's going to lead you into more, all right? But the idea, the point, is to pick one and to realize that it's your first door. It's your first door into yourself, into these components of you that have been kind of off limits to yourself. So one of the things that you'll have to accept right before you start doing this is that which you're about to go into, that which you're about to feel, is often going to be inappropriate. Society would disagree with the opinion that you're going to find. You will disagree with the opinion that you're going to find. You will feel like it's not proper to have these thoughts and emotions towards someone, which is why they've been suppressed. And that includes yourself. So if you can go ahead and just understand that before I go into these negative emotions, I know I'm going to find things that I think are inappropriate. And I'm going to allow that to be okay. I'm going to allow it to be okay for me to have thoughts and feelings that are inappropriate. Because the point of this exercise is not to be appropriate. The point of this exercise is to know yourself. Okay? So when you dive into an emotion, let's say that you are You're noticing that you have this constant irritation towards someone. All right. Every time you're around someone, you feel irritated, and it's very easy to lose your temper with them. Okay. That sort of thing. That means that you have a lot of unresolved stuff inside of you regarding that individual and regarding yourself. Because ultimately, all that person is doing is showing you some things that you haven't yet seen about yourself. All right. And ultimately, when you're talking about the laws of magnetism, someone that you guys don't want to be around, often you will end up being around either that person or someone who represents those same things over and over and over again until you heal or until you transform this area of, quote, negativity, or this area of something that you don't want. And the reason you'll experience it over and over again is because it is your life showing you you've got an area over here that's taking up a lot of your energy and is keeping you from being able to line up with everything that you want in this life. So you need to pay attention to it. Okay? That is the way life is constantly speaking to you. So let's say you go into this irritation, all right? So this is what you do. You literally go into the emotion itself. And so you're holding your presence, your power of awareness within the emotion itself, which means that you're able to fully feel the emotion. And when you get into these emotions like anger, for example, it's not comfortable at all. It's going to feel like you're overwhelmed with it, like you're kind of being taken over with it, almost like you're burning alive type feeling. And what you want to do is be able to sit in that and hold awareness within it, hold presence within it. What happens with energy when you start to hold your presence and awareness within something that's unwanted? It essentially starts to unravel it. So when you get into the area of negative emotion, often the way that it looks to us, because we see everything through energy, it looks like entanglement. All right. It looks like a tangled, knotted mess. All right. So when you start putting your awareness into an area like anger toward a person, what happens is that awareness itself, that presence itself, starts untangling the energy. All right. So this is the process of alchemy. As it starts untangling and you're holding your presence within it, you will start receiving information and insight about that emotion that you're sitting in. You will start receiving information about why it's there, how long it's been there. Of course, this is dependent upon how long you can stay with it. You will receive information about how to not be in it anymore. You will receive information about what it actually is. All right. So let's explore a possibility. You're sitting in the middle of anger toward a specific person. And as you sit there and you feel things unfold, you kind of watch the visions that are unfolding as you're holding presence with it. You realize that this situation goes back all the way into your childhood, actually has nothing to do with the person you're presently feeling angry with, but actually has to do with, let's say, your grandfather when you were 3 years old. So now you're taken deeper into that emotion and getting closer to where that general signal began, all right? Because over the years, that signal has been collecting all kinds of stuff to help you pay attention to it. So it's like it's just like something that's gotten corroded. And you have to allow the layers of the corrosion to start sloughing off until you can get into that center and really understand what's going on. And what you end up finding is that, in fact, the core emotion of that whole thing is a sense of betrayal. All right. Perhaps you were touched improperly or something when you were 3. And this sense of betrayal, which then caused extreme anger, created this now constant irritation whenever you're in the vicinity of someone who's kind of poking those buttons, basically, of whatever that felt like at that original encounter. All right. So when you start understanding that it's all coming from an original sense of betrayal, number one, you start to be able to have a lot more compassion toward yourself about having it, instead of irritation toward yourself about having it, right? Because when you guys feel irritated constantly, you also end up feeling irritated toward yourself. Like, irritated again. And so the irritation kind of feeds off of each other. But when you start getting in there, and you don't have to have visuals, you don't have to have a great understanding of where it came from, as long as you can get to the emotion of what it came from, okay? So as long as you can follow the emotion into its core element, what occurred isn't that important, all right? But just for the sake of discussion, you have the visuals, you've been led back into the betrayal. Now you're sitting with the betrayal. Now you're sitting with that original piece of you that was deeply wounded, okay? So what we want you guys to understand is that all negative emotion is coming from some space of wounding. And if you can hold this within your understanding, it will help you transform these things. Well, anything that has wounding needs time to heal, needs its own type of salve, okay? So what is your specific salve? Number one, always across the board, what we can say is that that salve is going to really consist of compassion. This is a very important element to transforming negative emotion, is the ability to extend compassion to yourself while you're feeling the emotion itself. Because that is your way of saying to yourself, I'm sorry that you're suffering. I don't want you to suffer. I'm here with you during the suffering, and I'm here to help you transform that suffering into peacefulness, joyfulness, whatever it is, all right? So now you're sitting in the betrayal. And as you're sitting in the betrayal and you're really understanding that original wounding, you're understanding where it came from, you're understanding how it feels, you're understanding how it's affected all of these different areas of your life. You can simultaneously start to ask yourself, if this is the core of this emotion, what is the opposite for me? Okay. So if you're sitting in that betrayal and in general you can feel this is really the energy of unsafety in here. That's what this created, this extreme energy of unsafety, unsafe. And you can say, well, so what I really want, what will help me feel peaceful is to feel safe. So now you have conscious understanding of how the wound began, what it actually is, what general energy it created for you, right? And you're able to understand that at the opposite end of that spectrum is this thing that you're wanting. You're wanting this feeling of safety. Now you can kind of test it because you realize, I want that feeling of safety. Now, given the person that I was originally mad at when I dove into this, do I feel safe around that person? And of course, if you've done what we've said and you've found out that the opposite of this is safety, then you're going to see, oh no, I actually don't. I don't feel safe around that person at all. And then you can say, why? Why don't I feel safe around that person? And we definitely think writing in all of these areas is very important because it helps you track what you're doing, because you're basically going into self-investigation, all right? So when you realize, well, I don't feel safe because of these specific things. Now you have, let's say you came up with 3 different things. Now you have 3 things where you can assess, okay, if this person is really important to me, and I truly don't want to feel anger toward this person, then it's very possible that I need to find a gentle way to communicate these 3 things that I've just found that are deeply contributing to the original wound of betrayal and feeling unsafe, which is then causing me to have all all of these emotional experiences based off of that, bringing me to this extreme state of irritation where I just can't be around this person. All right. So now you've gone to this person, you've addressed these issues of safety, and this person is very interested in having a good relationship with you. And they say, oh my gosh, okay, so if these things make you feel unsafe, then what can I do to help you feel safe? How can I help you in this area? How can I help not wound you further in this area, but help you heal in this area? And so this conversation can be extremely insightful and extremely healing in and of itself, right? And so then you've got two people working on this specific area of betrayal, which then created anger and irritation. And so not only have you gone all the way to the source to really understand that component, but you've now addressed why you went in the first place, which was specifically this person that you're interacting with that you felt angry and irritation toward. And you're taking the information that you've deeply understood and found out, applying it to your life presently so that you're not continuing to contribute to the emotional problem, right? And then the next step is to really be able to hold that safe space of safety that you've understood as the basic antidote to the original problem, and really start to understand, what does the space of safety feel like? And train your mind, your imagination, your state of awareness to be able to jump into that feeling state, okay? Simply for the sake of understanding the opposite feeling state. Because what deep negative emotions are explaining to you is that the general thoughts, the general emotions, the general everything you've been experiencing for a very long time is actually in the realm of this unsafe betrayal area. Okay, so now it's become a habit. When a negative emotion becomes a habit, you have to treat it like you do any other habit. You have to find a way to get yourself out of the habit and into a new habit. And this is what this part is. By understanding the core emotion in the first place, you then can deeply understand its opposite. When you deeply understand its opposite, you can use your imagination to begin exploring. What does that opposite feel like? What does safety feel like? And as you allow yourself to feel what safety feels like, as you allow yourself to explore that, you can train yourself to stay in that emotional state without needing any evidence, just to stay in the emotional state in order to feel what the opposite is like, okay? Because what you're doing is you're retraining your mind to feel something else, to pay attention to something else, to look towards something else. You're engaging in your ability to contribute to your own reality in a way that is beneficial for you instead of in a way that feels harmful to you. So the longer you can hold yourself in this state where you're feeling safety, okay? You're feeling safety. What does safety look like? What does it look like in your house if you're feeling safe? Let's say this person you had an issue with was your husband. What does it look like? How do you interact with each other in a safe environment? What does it feel like to act out of a place of safety? What do you say to someone when you're in a place of safety? What are you emitting when you're in a place of safety? Right? And to be able to really train yourself in asking all of these different types of questions and really being able to feel the answers to all of these questions. And to train yourself to stay in that mindset as much as you can. So that when you realize, ooh, that betrayal has been triggered, you can go through this process more quickly and be reaching for and be then sitting within the opposite, okay? Not through force, but through a natural progression. What begins to happen when you're able to do this entire process, when you're able to go into emotions in this way, is you really start getting a new blueprint for the way your life unfolds. You really start making different choices because you're no longer making choices out of an unaware state. You're making choices now out of an aware state. You're making choices toward something you know you want. Okay, so when you realize you want safety, do you see how much more detailed that understanding is? Okay, because where did you start out? You started out understanding, I have this negative emotion, it's anger and it's irritation toward this person. Can you find the opposite from that place? No, you cannot. You can't find the opposite from that place because it's an entanglement, like we said before. Because what's sitting in that place is not just your interactions with that person. What's sitting in that place is your interactions with that person, every person that was before that person, that was hitting on this betrayal aspect, this unsafe and betrayal aspect. And then you're also dealing with the emotions all the way from the beginning. So can you understand the opposite from just your current state of irritation? No, you can't. It's impossible. Which means that you don't have the power needed to move all of your energy in that direction. But once you have found the core of it, once you understand the core of it, then you can deeply understand the opposite. Once you understand the opposite, you can easily make decisions toward the opposite. All right? So all of the energy of you really starts getting on board with that decision of, I'm making choices, I'm making decisions based on where I want to go, which is into a place of safety, into a feeling state of safety. Okay? And everything in your life regarding that specific issue then starts to transform. So, do you guys understand what we've said so far? Do you have any questions? Because we'd love to answer your questions, to go further into this so that you can, we'd love to help you with your own emotional alchemy or help you with any difficulty you might be experiencing thinking about it or even trying it. You have a question?
I've got something
Okay.
through here.
That's fine.
Okay. 1 second, okay?
Mm-hmm. Keith is asking a question for someone.
Yeah, we'll have to wait. I'll ask him while she's typing this out.
Okay.
So why isn't talk therapy enough to work through these emotions?
So he asked, why isn't talk enough to work through these emotions? Well, it depends on who's doing the talk therapy. If we're doing the quote talk therapy, we can get anyone through anything. But what happens a lot of times is that talk therapy is the person who is facilitating is not trained energetically. Okay, they're not trained in their ability to feel when someone has actually uncovered a core emotion. If the therapist is not trained to be able to feel such a thing, then they're not going to be able to help that person navigate in the way that we just described. Okay? So this is both about talking and more so about feeling. So in order to have someone help you with emotional alchemy, you have to have someone who's, number one, engaged in this type of alchemy with themselves, because then they can feel when you are reaching some type of core, right? And they're able to basically guide you into that tunnel, into that hole. If you don't have someone who's trained in that way, they can't help you to do such a thing. In which case, what's going to happen? All that's going to happen is that you're going to sit there and rehash over and over again why you're angry. Okay, so you're basically gonna sit within the entanglement and talk about the entanglement, but not actually unwind it. Because there's a big difference between being able to truly feel emotion and allow yourself to be basically consumed by it in order to understand it and talk about emotion. Extremely different. One is easy to fake, basically, okay? Because any of you can kind of get wrapped up in a negative emotion and sit there and spin about it and talk about it. You do it all the time in your world. That's not the issue. The issue is that you don't go deeper with it. The issue is that you don't stop talking about it long enough to understand what it is. The issue is that you're too stuck in blaming other people and not willing enough to understand what it means to you and how to get out of it. So that's why talk therapy is not always the best way to go about it, because often the talk itself is a distraction. Okay, so often what happens in talk therapy is essentially you're paying someone to distract you further, and all you're doing is contributing to the chaos instead of unwinding it.
Shelley asks a question here. She says, what if the person you're angry at shifts the blame onto you?
Well, that's why we said you're going to understand this from a place of why you're going to explore this all the way down to the wounding itself, okay? So the first wounding. Now, the wounding that you have regarding the person that you're feeling angry toward, by the time you get around to speaking with that person about what you've uncovered, number one, it's all about you, okay? So there's not going to be a shift of blame, because the way that you're going to speak to that individual isn't about blame. The way you're going to speak to that individual is, okay, so I was feeling angry toward you, feeling irritated toward you, so I went into it and I started exploring, why was I having these emotions? And I found so much. But ultimately what I found was that at the root I had this extreme sense of betrayal and this extreme sense of unsafety because of it. And it helped me realize that there are certain aspects of our dynamic that feel similar to that original wounding. And so what I've discovered is that if you're interested, if you could act in this way toward me, it would help me feel safe within our relationship. Okay, so if you say something in that way, there is no way for a person to say to you that it's something is then your fault or you're to blame, because you didn't blame them. You just helped them understand how your dynamic or something they're doing is contributing to this feeling of unsafety. All right? Now, we're not saying that you're always going to have cooperative people in your life that are interested in doing this type of work with you. Often you're not going to. All right? But that's a new section. That's you going, okay, so I'm willing to really undergo this understanding. I'm willing to search this out within myself in order to understand something. And as soon as I bring this vulnerability to the table, as soon as I am very honest about where this is coming from, all this person wants to do is attack me. And you have to honestly ask yourself, what are you doing? Why are you in that relationship? Okay, and then you're at a new place to explore. All right. So one of the great things that can happen when you learn how to engage in this type of alchemy with yourself, and you learn how to make your own issues your issues, not blame, you can easily see who in your life is willing to do that type of work with you. You are able to see who else in your life is willing to be accountable for their own emotions. All right. And then that, if you find that you're in a relationship with someone who isn't willing to explore in this way, then now you have some more insight into the anger you've been feeling. All right? And you can explore that the way that we've just said. But for example, Angel, Keith, if both of them are very adept at this emotional alchemy, and they will often talk to each other about what they find. And they will often talk to each other about how they can help each other heal these components. And they're both in on it. They both want to help the other one heal it. And in general, when you guys love each other, that is what you do. You don't want to beat each other up for it. You want to love each other through it, right? So the response that you get from something like this, as long as you're making it about you when you're saying it, as long as you're not putting it into terminology of blame, then you can easily see when someone's willing to work with you. But that it's a great question, because that's an area that most humans need to work with a lot, is learning how to communicate their needs without putting blame on someone else. Okay? So saying things like, when you do this, I feel this. When you do this, I feel this, is different than saying, you made me feel this way. Do you see how they're different? One is acknowledging, these behaviors make me feel this way. That means you're owning up to the way you feel. You're owning up to how you're affected, and you're communicating it. When you say, you make me feel this way, or it's your fault, this, blah, 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 it's your fault that I feel this way, then basically what you're communicating to the other person is that you don't have any control over how you feel. They have all the control over how you feel. And somebody else doesn't know what to do with that. Even the most trained person would say in response to you, well, I can help you navigate that, but I can't change it for you. Now, the most untrained person is just going to get offended by it and say, screw it. So a lot of the responsibility is in your hands of how you communicate something. And if you guys can really begin to master the art of being able to communicate through your own accountability, then you will get a lot more cooperation from the people in your life. So here's a question. How do you work through the emotion of abandonment when it's two-sided? Being abandoned and abandoning yourself and others. Not even sure if that's an emotion. Okay. Well, we would still use the same process, and this is actually one of the reasons why we encourage people to work with us, because it's all good to talk about it and we can give you guidance, but in these, short hour webinars, but to really be able to help you find the core of an issue and then find its opposite and work toward the opposite, it really helps to work with us one-on-one, okay? So how do you work through any emotion of abandonment when it's two-sided? We're not sure what you mean by two-sided. Other than, okay, so being abandoned and abandoning yourself and others. Well, interestingly, most issues like that are two-sided, okay? Because if you're experiencing abandonment, if that's an emotion that's a sensation that you're used to experiencing, like we said, you're going to be creating from that place. So it's easier to abandon yourself and others when you're already feeling abandonment. All right? Just like it's easy to spread joy and happiness when you're feeling genuinely happy. And that's really the genius of this topic, is that truly what you're experiencing emotionally is what you're emitting. Whether you're allowing your behavior to be modified or not, what you're emitting is what you're emitting. So we would use the same process. We would still We go into the abandonment and feel it deeply in order to understand it. And as we were feeling it deeply, as we were holding presence within it, we would simultaneously be offering our compassion to it. And we would be allowing that abandonment to speak to us about how it came into existence and what it represents for us. Okay, so abandonment, what does it represent for you? Loneliness? Is this the space of feeling lonely? Most people who experience abandonment, which is almost every single person on your planet, experiences loneliness because of abandonment, okay? So this is going into a really deep issue because now you're at the core, which is this feeling of loneliness. And what is the opposite of loneliness for you? Let's say that the opposite of loneliness for you is connection. Okay, well, once you understand, okay, what I really want to be working toward is connection, then you have to start allowing yourself to explore how you get there. So how do you get to a place of connection? Number one, you have to be intimate. You have to, and we don't mean just sex or touching. We mean that in general, in order to experience connection, there has to be intimacy, right? So you start getting information about how you achieve the opposite. And then you have to engage all different parts of yourself. Because if you've been sitting in a place of abandonment and it's kind of been guiding your days, then you've got a lot of courage to conjure, to start practicing things that are going to result in the feeling of connection, right? But you can sit in that feeling of connection. You can start pulling from your life experience. Perhaps you had a child. And when that child was a baby, you for the first time in your life, you really felt what connection feels like. And so you have that as a reference. And so you take that little piece, you take that experience of connection, and you allow your awareness and your presence to sit completely within that feeling of connection. You allow yourself to know it in detail. You allow it to fill your body. You allow it to fill your mind. You allow yourself to observe the thoughts that come when you're in a place of connection. You allow yourself to feel the joy that happens, the calm that happens. And then you can start asking yourself, who in my life do I want connection with? And maybe you find that, oh man, I really want connection with my significant other. But now that I'm sitting in it, I'm realizing I've been too afraid to experience connection with that person. And because I've been afraid to experience connection, because I've been afraid of the abandonment, I've been pushing them away. I've been off limits, kind of. I've been withholding love. I've been withholding kindness. I've been going through the motions. So it means I really have to start pouring myself more into what I want. I have to start pouring myself into the connection I want and being willing to risk losing in order to feel the development occurring, okay? Here's another question. Need guidance in letting go of anger against my father about how he treated my mother mostly. She has now passed without having to confront him. Okay. So if we were experiencing anger in this way toward our father who had mistreated our mother, and the wording there, without having to confront him. Number one, she could have confronted him, okay? So that's important for you to realize, that it was never your job to be the one to confront him. It was hers. And that might hurt when you first realize that, the truth of that. But each person, especially adults in relationships, are responsible for their own feelings within those relationships, all right? They're the ones responsible for doing something about it. So it's interesting when there is a dynamic like this where there's anger toward one person for how they treated the other person. And then you see that that person, at least in your understanding, never confronted. It means that the deeper you go into that, you're also going to find anger toward the person who was mistreated, because they also contributed to a dysfunctional dynamic, right? Because as long as you allow someone to mistreat you, what is the message you're sending to that person? The message you're sending to the person is, it's okay for you to mistreat me. And so both people end up being responsible for the dysfunctional dynamic. Okay? This is why it is important to be very honest with each other. It is important to understand what your emotions are. So when someone is an individual who is mistreating someone else, number one, you have to realize that person, whoever is sitting within that type of emotion where they're actually mistreating someone else over and over again because of what they're not able to get control over. It means that they're suffering, all right? So one of the best ways to come to a place where you're able to let go of anger is to realize that every single bit of wounding that's happening in this world is happening because that person is suffering. All right? There is no, quote, evil person who is not suffering, or there is no evil deed that doesn't have suffering behind it. And when you really take that to heart, you start to realize, oh my gosh, I held these high standards for my parents, but ultimately they were kids raising kids. And this person didn't know how to deal with his emotions. This person didn't know how to deal with her emotions. And they created all this dysfunction from it. And as I zoom myself out from this more and more, I can see that in fact, this entire dynamic was avoidable through self-awareness. But what I'm seeing is that there wasn't self-awareness. And when there isn't self-awareness, there's no way to heal or correct something, all right? Furthermore, when I zoom out on this type of topic, what I can see is that someone became very comfortable in being the victim, which is its own type of dysfunction. And what happens in your society, because you guys collectively basically say, it's okay to be the victim. You're a good person if you're the victim. You're a bad person if you're not. So you're a bad person if you're the one inflicting harm, right? But when you really start understanding dynamics, you can see clearly that in a situation like this, where this type of abuse goes on year after year, year after year, both people are contributing to it. And so you start realizing, there's more of a blurred line between victim and perpetrator. And the deeper you take that, and the more understanding you have with the people that are behaving in the ways they're behaving, the more you understand that it doesn't matter what dynamic you dive into, there's going to be a victim and a perpetrator. Okay, so even in someone who has become the perpetrator, if you dive into them more and more and more to understand who they are, then you see very clearly where all of these periods of their life, they were the victim. And so they're only operating out of that space of wounding too. So you've got almost an entire world operating out of this space of wounding, blaming each other for the wounding that they're creating on top of it. And the answer to the whole thing is for everyone to become much more accountable for their own woundings, accountable for being able to transform those places of wounding, accountable for being able to communicate to others how to help them do that, accountable for understanding how to help others do that for them. Do you understand what we're saying? So in our opinion, the way out of that type of anger is to be able to zoom out from your very personal experience and see the truth of all of that entire dynamic, okay? To where the lines are a lot more blurred. And everyone in that dynamic didn't do their part to heal it. Okay. We hope that you all have enjoyed this. We hope that you're able to begin practicing it. And if you find yourself stuck in this area, reach out to Angel, okay? Reach out to us. This is our area of expertise, and we can take you as deep as you want to go, and we can help you transform anything, truly anything. All right, so we'll see you on the next webinar. Thank you so much for showing up to this one. We love all of you.